Recording to start. So there we go. Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the Nordic Convention on International Affairs 2020. Thank you all for tuning in on this Sunday afternoon to the final session called Nordic-Baltic Youth in Climate Politics. Today, we are going to explore points of view from climate politics from different kinds of perspectives, both climate summits and the grassroots initiative from different people, different young people in the Nordic and Baltic region. A few words before that about the Nordic Convention on International Affairs as a project. This is a collaboration made by several international affairs associations in the Nordic countries and Estonia. This particular year's convention has been a collaboration between the Finnish Association of International Affairs, the Rahvusvaheliste Suhteiden Ring Association from Tartu, Estonia, International Debate at the University of Copenhagen, the Danish Foreign Policy Society, also from Copenhagen, and the Swedish Association of International Affairs, together with its member associations. In tech support roles, you will see two ladies from UF Malmö, so helping you out with all kinds of technicalities you may have and experience in the Zoom call. So if you have anything technical during the event, then just please feel free to turn to those. They have tech support written in their names, so you can write directly to them in the chat. Now, moving on to present what the Nordic Convention is, just briefly. The Nordic Convention, like I said, is a collaboration project between these associations I just mentioned, and with the purpose to also foster Nordic collaboration between different associations of international affairs in our region. And this is the first time when we bring in also the Baltic element to the Nordic Convention, together with this panel right now, exploring the climate topic from a Nordic and Baltic youth perspective. So we are very, very happy about being able to do just that. We would have been doing this live in Copenhagen at the physical event in April if it were not for the pandemic. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are now doing it digitally instead in September of 2020. And now I will stop talking and briefly just introduce the panelists, and then we are ready to dig deep into the substance. So we have at the panel Sofie Winge-Petersen from Denmark, who is a member of the Climate Youth Council of Denmark. It's an initiative from the government there that was originally proposed by one of the UN Youth Representatives to the climate summit some earlier years. We have also Fredrika Andersson, who holds the position as a junior youth representative to COP26, so an upcoming COP international climate meeting, on behalf of LSU, the National Council of Swedish Youth Organizations. And in addition, she has a background in the Swedish Association of International Affairs, so one of the organizing associations of this conference. We also have with us today Kristiāna Plāte from Latvia. She was the former UN Youth Delegate and also the first UN Youth Delegate of that country. Also attended a COP event. She is now studying at the University of Amsterdam, so doing an exchange there. And another person who is also doing her exchange studies at the moment is Lotta Närhi. She is the manager of the Go Fossil Free divestment campaign at the University of Helsinki, very passionate about finding solutions to the global issues of climate change and biodiversity loss, and currently doing her exchange studies in Bologna in Italy. And finally, we also have a wonderful moderator for this panel. It is Liudas Mikal. Friends call him Louis. He's an international entrepreneur and a consultant with a background in sustainable energy, food tech, innovation management, and partaking in many different global platforms such as the Global Shapers and the Climate Reality Leadership Core. And with that, I will give the word over to you, Louis.
Thank you so much, Sake, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I think that I'm beyond excited about this panel, and I'm quite happy to be surrounded by four amazing panelists. And I think you did a brilliant job giving a brief introduction about them. So before I give the floor to every panelist to say a bit more about themselves, I was just wanting to outline some things that I really thought that they have brilliantly worth praise in their introductions. So I think that going from the top here on my Zoom is Fredrika Andersson, and she is representing. She represented Swedish youth at the COP26. I think you mentioned that, and she is very passionate about youth inclusion in climate action and solving the climate crisis in the midst of the pandemic. So I think that's a very worthy. These are very worthy points to mention, especially in the current context of things. And then we have also Sofie Winge-Petersen from Denmark, and yeah, Sophie is great, and she is studying engineering and working with a startup that's improving packaging. I think that's a very interesting perspective to look at, how to incorporate tech focus, or like this kind of startup focus, and climate education, and this grassroots activism. So I think Sophie is definitely a very multifaceted person. So we're going to have amazing perspectives from her. And then we have Lotta Närhi from University of Helsinki, who's currently in Bologna. And what really amazed me is that she coordinated successful Go Fossil Free campaign at the University of Helsinki, making the university to divest from its investments in fossil fuel industry. And I think it's really interesting to hear more about that, and the perspective from Lotta about this activism and how we can replicate that in other places. And last but not least, Kristiāna Plāte from Latvia. Very nice to have representation from the Baltic side as well. And she had the opportunity to participate in the COP25 in Madrid. And from early days in school, she was interested in young people's participation in climate action, and she is a youth delegate right now. So I think that she will have great, amazing perspectives too to share. So without further ado, I want to open the floor for every panelist to say a bit more about themselves, so then we can have a great discussion sharing about the different perspectives. And so is there anyone who wants to go first?
I can do it.
Perfect.
Awesome. So thanks a lot for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here, a part of this discussion today. I'm really excited about the upcoming conversation. And yeah, I'm just going to jump straight into the topic. I think you've already introduced me quite well. So I'm Lotta, University of Helsinki, and yeah, I basically coordinated a campaign in my university 2019. I just wanted to basically open the background of this campaign a little bit, because maybe the concept is not something that everyone's super familiar with. So basically, societal actors, institutions have investment, be it a church or a city pension fund. A lot of this, they have investments in order to fund their, and unfortunately, it's the case that still a lot of these institutions hold investments in the fossil fuel industry, which is a huge problem that was recognized by this NGO called 350. Some years back, they started this kind of like global movement they call movement, where basically the core demand was to demand every institutional investor to divest their investments, so withdraw their investments from the fossil fuel industry and to stop funding it, basically. And it was as a part of this global movement that I, as a member of Helsinki University, decided to start a local campaign to support those same goals in the start of 2019. And basically, as an outcome of that campaign, in the end of last year, the university committed to divesting its funds from the fossil fuel industry. And that's basically shortly what I've been up to. Thanks.
Wonderful. Who's willing to go next?
I can go.
Sophie, perfect.
So yeah, as it was mentioned, I'm part of the Danish Youth Climate Council. So it's basically a council that was started in March 2019, where 10 people at that time were elected from all of Denmark, especially like focusing on being geographically different as well as education. And it was started by our EU representative at the time, where they mentioned it for the climate minister of Denmark at COP24, I guess. Yeah, and then we have been working for now a year and a half, roughly, doing recommendations to the ministry and the minister within climate, energy, and utensils. So what we basically do is that we meet with a lot of the industry, NGOs, as well as young people from all over Denmark. And then we gather recommendations and try to figure out how we can play a role in these climate politics. So in Denmark, we have an adult climate council that's basically scientists and professors from universities. And then we're kind of like the little brother that's been elected by the ministry. And then now we're 13 members of the council, where 6 represent youth organizations within climate, so like our nature organization and organization for agriculture and stuff like that. So very diverse council that then works for getting these recommendations that kind of takes all the sides of society like into account, which is really useful as well of trying to be a voice for youth and trying to hear youth all around Denmark. Then me personally, I'm studying as process and innovation engineering at DTU, so Danish Technical University of Denmark. And then I'm working on this startup, so trying to make sustainable packaging, especially within the paint industry. Sounds really weird, but it's a thing that we throw out a lot of paint buckets at the moment. Yeah, and then I think to me one of the really what got me into climate change was working a lot of the sustainable development goals and kind of realizing that climate is the one that's going to affect the other goals the most, like basically pull them backwards in terms of like hunger, education, all that, as well as a lot of the solutions being equality, education, a lot of the solution for climate change lay in like improvement within the other goals. Yeah, and then I have, yes, so basically one of the point of view that I really like is trying to look into the future. So we as a young generation now, if we look to 2035 or like 15 years into the future, then a lot of the young people we see on the streets now doing all these actions, they will be like, if we twice their age, but it will be when they hit the labor market. And that's kind of interesting point of view, at least to me, to then see how do we create businesses where they can be like an asset and they want and demand impact jobs, as well as the whole society that we have at that moment. How do we get people to choose more sustainable carbon taxes? And so yeah, love to hear more from you guys in this discussion.
Thank you, Sophie. Just before we go with the next panelist, I wanted to remind everyone that you can think of questions and post them in the Zoom chat. So as soon as someone says something that really interests you, don't hesitate to just add your questions. And now, who wants to go next? Okay, lots of interest. Go, Fredrika.
I just dive in. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm really excited for this upcoming discussion. And so nice to hear from both you, Lotta, and you, Sophie, about your great examples on how to really take a step forward in tackling this crisis. My name is Fredrika. I am a political science and development studies student, passionate about youth and climate. And luckily I hold a position where I can combine those two areas of interest as the Swedish youth delegate to COP26, together with my senior colleague Ludwig, who went to COP25. And as mentioned before, I have a background in the Swedish Association of Foreign Affairs, where I was the travel coordinator for UF Uppsala. So I had the chance to actually meet with youth all around the globe and also dive into their point of views on climate and how that affects their lives. But right now I have a role as part of the Swedish delegation to COP26. And then many of you might think, that's not going to go very well because COP26 has been postponed. And yes, that is unfortunately true and really not what we needed at this stage in the climate crisis. The conference in Glasgow has been postponed until next year, November 2021. And a lot of the negotiations have gone digital as well as my work. But as we all know, climate change isn't taking a break, even though the rest of the world might be doing just that. So there's really no time to waste. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion and dive into how we can use this current pandemic as an opportunity to carry through system change, and what the role of youth is in all of that. Since youth is not only the future, we're already suffering from climate change. We're already taking action to try to stop climate change, and I think that just underlines the importance of us being part of every conversation and every decision being made. So I'm looking forward to discussing all of that with you.
Thank you, Fredrika. And now we give the floor to Kristiāna.
Yes, thank you, first of all, that you're including Baltic states also in this conversation. I would really appreciate it. I think this kind of conversations are needed more and more because we can learn from each other and each other's experiences. Yes, now we have the second youth delegate to UN from Latvia, but I was the first one. And in Latvia, we have one delegate. So the one delegate goes to almost all events where the delegation of Latvia decides the youth representation is needed. And last year, 2 weeks before actually COP, Latvian delegation decided to include me. So I had precisely 2 weeks to prepare for this cool event. And I say that Fredrika is like, oh my God, that's not cool. But it was first year of our program, so everybody was getting new, and I think it was really cool that they, even if in the last minute, decided that, okay, fine. And now it's not a discussion that next delegate is going to COP26. But what I wanted to contribute to actually today to this discussion is perspective from somebody who has been, of course, in the way the world used to be before COVID times, in this kind of negotiation process and this kind of event. Maybe not so much from, okay, let's be talk about more about this topic or this topic kind of way, but how the dialogue on the place itself was structured, because even so there was a lot of reports from COP25 about that the carbon market rules weren't established, that there are so many things actually that you have to do. The organization of the process on the place itself, I think, was phenomenal. In a way, it was really closed quarters. There was, in comparison to other events that I have been, for example, in New York, around the arena that the COP took place, there was nothing. So all delegates, all NGO representatives are in this huge hall together. And what was also really amazing, I think, about this conference is that for those huge diplomats that needed to go to the negotiation process, to get to the rooms, they needed to go throughout all the NGO stands. They needed to go through all the stands where the side events were happening, and the side events were really put represented in a way that you noticed what kind of topics they were talking about. You noticed how also the side events weren't just as, hey, let's take climate action. For me, as an international law student who also wasn't really prepared for going to COP as I should have, it was really interesting for me to see in those side events also discussion about climate and human rights. So you're looking at the climate change from the human rights perspective. You're looking about climate changes from urban development perspective. I met so many amazing people that changed my mind, how I look at this dialogue that we have about the climate change. So I think, yeah, that's how I can contribute today. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, what an amazing group of panelists. And I think that the topic or the main theme that I see around all of us today is that we really care about youth action and youth participation. And I would say that the first question to follow up I would like to ask is perhaps goes well with Fredrika, is like how do we include youth into all the work that is done, and especially in the context of pandemic, how is youth best included in the solving of climate emergency?
Thank you. Well, I'm really passionate about that, so thank you for directing such a question to me. I think what Kristiāna, well, your testament from the Latvian youth inclusion process is kind of typical of how youth are very often included, many times in the last minute and many times without the possibility to have information and possibility to have enough resources in time and finance. And sometimes without the possibility to substantially contribute and not just symbolically. At least that is also something that we see in many different settings where youth is involved, and that is something that we need to move away from. We have the testament of lovely Swedish youth activist Greta Thunberg, where she talks about all the politicians just wanting to take selfies with her, and showing that we're including youth, but not really listening to what we actually have to say and changing their policies accordingly. So I think what's really important is giving those resources that we need, but also to institutionalize inclusion. I think what has been done in Denmark is an extraordinary example, and something that LSU, the organization that I'm representing, is working towards, actually having a youth climate council where you know that you have a meeting booked with the minister each month or each year. You get to prepare for it. You have a very clear opportunity and also like clear agenda. I think that is really important, and something that we all need to learn from. And also, even more so in a global pandemic, I think all of us have seen how how many possibilities we have of meeting online, like we are doing right now. But there's also a risk as these negotiations continue, but virtually, that youth is not included and civil society is left out. Especially when these meetings are carried out physically, there's usually going to be a limit of how many can participate, and then the prioritization is usually that youth and other civil society organizations such as indigenous peoples or people mostly affected by the climate crisis is left out. So that is something that needs to change. Well, I'm a strong advocate for giving youth the resources that we need, and also for perhaps for us young people to actually put demands on those inviting us, not just saying, oh, thank you very much, I would love to participate, but also saying, okay, I want to participate, but then I need this and this and this. I think that is something that we need to move forward on.
Thank you. And okay, yeah, I see Kristiāna has a point to add, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I have one little point to add. Yeah, about when you are establishing a new program, because we last year established, it was first trial about UN Youth Delegate representation and how we are going to do it. Is one thing that really helped us actually was talking with our ambassadors in different countries, talking with our ministers and saying that, well, okay, we are establishing this program that is established around the world almost, and we have great examples, of course, in Scandinavia and around our neighbors, how it should be done. But what would be different in our understanding, in a way, what would be good for Latvia, how we are going to establish this program, is that we are trying to do everything meaningfully. So we are, I was going and saying to the ambassadors and everything, okay, fine, but if I will be there, what would be the add factor to that? If you are going there, what is the meaningfulness there? And actually, when you are vocalizing the words itself, they're like, oh, yeah, okay, fine. Yes, at the COP, I maybe have been a little bit tokenized, and only, I think, officially in the delegations, it was only 7 youth delegates who had the delegation badge, not NGO badge, but proper delegation badge, and I was one of them, and Latvia was really proud. But after the process, we were like, okay, so I saw what was COP, and I said with my ministry, we were like, how we can make this next step for next delegate meaningfulness. So yeah, that's what only I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah, and what a great perspective. I think that always it's strange that sometimes the youth voice has to be justified why this part of society needs to join certain events, when quite logically the biggest stakeholders of the future are the youth of today. So it's really mind-blowing in certain contexts. But I'm really fascinated that, Fredrika, you mentioned Denmark, and I know Denmark has amazing policies towards going to green energy, and in my opinion, I think that the youth is very included. But I'm very curious to hear Sophie's point of view. How is it more being there, and what's the situation of youth inclusion solving the climate emergency in Denmark?
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So in terms of what Fredrika said, then how it's structured in Denmark at the moment is that we have a specific requirements of 2 meetings with the Danish Minister of Climate, Energy and Utilities each year. So that's a huge beginning where we got in March this year. We went to him and we represented our advice on how to solve food waste as well as a carbon tax. And that has been so useful to get in contact with him directly. I think we have 1.5 hours to present our views. At the same time, we've been doing 8 recommendations so far, and I'm actually at the moment taking over and going through them as much the ministry actually have acted on. And that's kind of where this might not be the best solution, because how do we force them to actually act on the recommendations rather than it being a political statement? Now we're included, now they can stop include youth because we're already included, but at the same time they doesn't really act on their recommendations. So that kind of where the problems might be. Yeah, but at the same time, at least carbon tax is something that's they're working on now and during this autumn, where we hope that it's going to have been part of the debate at least. What I'm working on at the moment in the end today, take this kind of youth inclusion on a country basis down to the local level, which I think is really useful. So this structure of having 10 elected members of the country, that's a meeting, we meet typically like every once or twice every second month, then take this down on a local level to simply work with the municipalities and then trying to get them into the mayor's office, maybe have like people from secondary school and high school, and then elect 10 people from the municipality, and then trying to get them to work together on how to solve climate change locally. I think that's the next step, because we have so many recommendations on what to do on a country level, but it's actually on the local level that so much can be done. How do we make a difference to this new road that's being planned? How do we plant more trees? How do we make a difference for this factory that might otherwise go abroad? All these kind of things can be handled locally. So that's at least a different way that might also be easier to implement in other countries, rather than begin with a ministry, begin with a climate council at the top and start locally. Find few people at your high school or like secondary school, even like universities, and try to see if you can get in touch with the municipality, the mayor's office. Maybe you can start a council there. We have in Denmark 1/3 of each municipalities have a youth council, but they don't have a youth climate council. So that's where we're working. We have 3 at the moment in all of Denmark municipalities where they have these kind of youth climate councils locally. Yeah, and then another inclusion for youth would be definitely be through education. So we can't have these like discussions if we don't include education in climate change in like secondary school, high school. I meet so many people that even like the difference between environment and climate, and so hard to have a proper discussion with people when all they hear is like from social media and all that. So that's just to me at least a different, very important perspective. Yeah,
these are great points, and I think that I might second the fact that what I hear is that there is youth inclusion on the national level, but not always youth is heard. And in just a second, I will definitely ask for that perspective from Lotta. But I think that another thing that I took away is the key word, the grassroots activism, where instead of going to the national level and kind of like working on like really huge horizon, you focus more on your community and kind of make huge impact there. Because the way I understood from your point, Sophie, is that in the local context, youth is much better heard, and the solutions are addressed much better than on like a large scale national level. And I'll definitely come back to you about the carbon tax, but now. From Lotta, I really want to hear more. So we talked or discussed how it goes with like this political engagement, but how it goes in more of a like something more applicable to the private sector. Like, for example, making the university to drop investments in fossil fuels, and potentially, you know, like making a lot of investment funds or just different stakeholders to drop investments in the dirty industries. So please share your perspective.
Yeah, so just to tie it back to the theme of youth, I somehow I'm not surprised that a lot of these fossil-free campaigns around the world are in universities organized by young people. And just as an example, in my university, just from our point of view, we have a lot on stake, like, because the investments that the university have are funding the university's activities, such as research, teaching. So there's this like gear towards, like, they are investing the money for us. And so it just seemed so conflicting for us young people then, that at the same time those same investments were working against us by destroying the nature, destroying the climate. And so I was just not surprised that it was just us young people who sort of like stepped up to start talk about this problem. And basically we had a few core arguments that we were saying to the university during our campaign, mainly just trying to make them understand that it's unethical to do such a controversial thing like invest money for us, that it was their moral to drop those fuel industry. And at that point the university kind of replied by saying that, you know, they need to make money in order to keep the teaching going, to keep the research going. But actually when we had an amazing campaign team and we really dived deep into this like almost science of investments and climate, and what we found out, according to loads of research, is that actually having investments in fossil fuel industry is very risky for the portfolio. So actually it was just endangering the money that was going to be put towards our education. And at the same time, what we found out is that it's actually not like, it is not a risk for the profit to divest the money away from the fossil fuel industry. So by taking it away from there, the university wouldn't lose anything. It wouldn't lose any of its profits. So we were just there like, why not do it? And first we found it quite difficult to get our voices heard. We somehow felt like, I don't know if the other panelists feel the same way, but I have this feeling that in Finland, at least sometimes when you're a young person, you try to speak up. Somehow the people around you treat you a little naive. Like, we almost got this sort of reply from the investment board saying, you know, but you don't understand the realities. We have to make money. But we just dug deeper into the like world of research, and we came up with this like long petition with loads of like scientific sources stating that what we were suggesting was economically viable and morally just. And finally, I think what really helped us to get our message through in the end was the fact that in the university, as a local institution, they had already incorporated into the system routes for us to get our voices heard. So who was making the decisions related to investments in our university is the university board. And in the university board, there's always 2 seats reserved for university students. And it was those 2 people in the end who somehow almost acted as the messengers of our campaign, delivering our petition and our greetings to the rest of the board. So I could say that at least in my experience, the university had already some sort of structures in place in order to listen to the young people's voices, and eventually they did listen. So it's only my example, but maybe it's this kind of like participation that I think is needed in also more national and international level. Like you just have to reserve seats for the youth in the same negotiation table with the adults. It's the only way to get our voices heard.
Yeah, thank you for such great perspective. Before I let Kristiāna ask the question, I have one quick follow-up. And so I'm just like curious in the practicalities of this campaign. Did you reach the solution to divest like immediately, or was there like a certain transition period that you had, or like how did it happen in the practical sense? To maybe like just give some examples, how can others do that, and what demands are reasonable and what are maybe too hard to ask for?
Yeah. Well, I have to say that before our campaign, there had been another one in our university some years ago, which had kind of finished because the people running it had graduated from the university. But we were able to almost step in, and what we were saying was not new. So I think it helped us, and it speeded the process up, and it only took us 1 year to get the university to commit to our demands, which is quite a short amount of time. I feel like a lot of these campaigns usually they take a couple of years, but in our case, thanks to the work that the previous campaign had done, we set up a petition. We went around the university, different kinds of events, trying to get signatures, trying to tell the board of the university that the other students and the staff are behind our demands. And basically, after 1 year of campaigning, finally, the university board, who had received our petition, decided to act according to our demands. And so it was a pretty fast procedure in our case. But the divestment itself is then going to take another 2 years. So the commitment came in the end of 2019, originally saying that by the end of 2020 they would divest, but now, presumably because of the instability in the finance market due to the COVID-19, it's been postponed until the end of 2021. But yeah, I think it's in the end of the fast track solutions to the climate change. Like money moves fast in the end. So I feel like in that sense, what I've been doing is rewarding in a different way, and almost requires less patience than what the other panelists that I'm listening to the work that you've been done. Almost seems like slightly longer of a marathon that you others are up to.
Thank you. So Kristiāna, please go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you. I have one maybe seemingly crazy question, because I have one idea that has been marinated in my mind for quite some time, and I wasn't supposedly like in my thinking that I would brought it up, but I'm gonna risk it, and maybe we'll have really interesting discussion about this. Lotta, when you were organizing this campaign, did you consider like getting more involvement in the campaign from somebody who is studying psychology, like behavioral studies, I don't know, like like people management anthropology or something like that in your team, and look at from that perspective?
Well, not specifically. I think we were very open for anyone to join the campaign. But eventually it ended up being a lot of environmental economists, just people that I knew from before. But I think the point you're raising is very relevant. A lot of this climate battle actually comes down to like sociology, almost like people's pre-assumptions about what should and should not be done. So I feel like some knowledge about psychology and even marketing would have would have helped us maybe to get our message through quicker. But yeah, it's an interesting point you're raising.
Yes, because when I was looking through my COP25 notes, I was also at the time looking, maybe you know the TV series Mad Men, that's basically about advertisements. And I looked at my notes and I was like, think as a madman when you are putting your ideas and proposals on. And actually now when we are talking about, and I'm reflecting all of my experiences that I have with the climate activism, I'm thinking about, oh, that's actually for maybe a big traumatic event for the bigger, like the older generations, because they have to admit that they fucked up, you know, like they have to come over, they have to be the bigger person. And this may be a little bit unpopular opinion, but I was at the UN General Assembly Hall when Greta Thunberg said her famous speech, "How dare you?" Oh my God, the mood before her speech at the Great Hall was so like amazing. I couldn't believe that I'm in the room, because even if the Donald Trump was in the room beforehand, everybody was like, okay, fine, we had the great speeches beforehand of amazing other world leaders, and everybody was like, yeah, we are gonna do it. It's one day, but we are gonna do it. She told speech and everybody was like dead silent. And for the rest of the day, everybody was dead silent. And it was a really traumatic experience even for me as a young person. It wasn't in a way like reflected to me, but it was really traumatic experience. And I think maybe one of the things that we should do when we are talking about youth participation, when we are talking about these climate actions, we are talking about also effects of COVID now, is get our friends who are studying psychology, who are studying sociology, etc., to get more involved in this kind of discussions and tell their perspective. Because from international law perspective, I can talk like, okay, nice, we have this law, we have this treaty, this agreement, da 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 da. If you go to arbitration, we can win, we can lose, fine. But as a society, we also have to change, and it is hard. Even if I moved to Amsterdam and my plastic waste improved in 1 month, because I have to find where I can buy the things, where I can how I can sustain them, etc., etc. And still, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I have this much plastic waste. I have never had it in Latvia back then. So yeah, this is a little bit crazy idea maybe out there, and that wasn't what we discussed beforehand that we were gonna talk about in this discussion, but I think it came up quite naturally. So yeah.
Yeah, these are great points. I'm just looking at the time, and I think that we're gonna open in about 10 minutes the floor to the questions from the audience. And before that, I'm just curious if any panelists have questions for each other, or did anything spark your attention that you wanted to dive a bit deeper? Yeah, Lotta, please.
I'm muting myself. Thank you. Yeah, I basically just a follow-up on the topic that I was talking about, how I felt like in my university after some battle and you know, serious conversation, eventually we felt like the university board and leaders still wanted to include us. But what I was wondering, because all the other panelists, you've been involved in a more higher national or even international level. What's your feeling been on this topic? Have you felt like the fact that you've been a youth representative in the COP meetings, or Sophie in the Youth Climate Council, have you felt like you've just been there for the show, or have you actually felt like there's a genuine will for the rest of the people to actually hear what you have to say and take you seriously, basically.
Can I answer? Yeah. So at least to me, I feel really like the thing you're saying with like you have to dive so much deeper into the research. I think we're putting a huge pressure on climate activists that want to participate in the debate, because there's so much more demand on them having the facts. You hear politicians all the time, like they just throw out numbers and they don't really have like footnotes or anything on them. And then at least that's my experience whenever we're doing recommendations, we have like this huge list of footnotes. Where do you find it? It's almost always international papers that like credibility, all that thing. Like, I think, yeah, so I feel you exactly. You need to have like your facts straight, and that's like, how do we dare like even demand that of the youth, that they should know all the climate facts and all the international politics? I've been reading the underground law of Denmark to understand the investment in the North Sea, and I'm like, why would I do that? But that's like the thing you need to do in order to like make proper recommendations. So yeah, exactly. That's like, you can, yeah. I think, yeah, that's just my point of view.
I can only second what Sophie's saying, and I think at least I haven't been to a COP yet, so I think I will see how they treat me there. But my experience with the Swedish Ministry of Environment is that I think many people within power institutions, they want youth to take action. They want youth to be there and to speak up, because they might not be in the role or the position where they feel that they can do that, because they are tied back by voters or by having to remain professional. So I think many actually want us to be there, but they are placing a really unfair responsibility on us, just as Sophie is saying, because we don't have the same resources or the same power to take the lead, and we need, and we certainly are not experts on a very, very small issue, as many of the ones sitting there can speak quite confidently about the issue. So I think that is the challenge, to actually take the chances to be included, but also put demands the way I said it before. And I really understand the speech that you mentioned, Kristiāna, from Greta. How dare you place this burden on youth when we are the ones who are also going to pay the price? So that is my take on it.
Well, in my experience, before I was a youth delegate of Latvia, I had done quite a lot of work. I had at least for like 3-4 years of lobbying for youth delegate program. And then I needed to prove, I started when I was in high school, so I needed to prove that I could be as good as any entry position diplomat in Latvian embassy. I needed to prove that I understand finances very well, that I am like on the level of negotiations as, I don't know who had this point where like what they expected from me. Yes, they expected a lot, but when I became a youth delegate, one of the amazing blessings that I had is that they listened to me. Even now, if I write them an email as a previous youth delegate, they know that I'm really serious and scary for them. But we also have this mutual trust. By this work that I put forward, I built mutual trust with them, that they are comfortable with me discussing things that usually politicians does not. And even so, like, this is the weird balance, I think. Even so, they are asking us, hey, do this big amount of work. And it seems unfair. Why? At the time. I think on the human level, for them, it shows that you have this character, that you have your spine straight, and okay, you put work for me, fine. I will do my homework, I will do my research, go to the next meeting, and you will listen to me. And we are gonna discuss not as young person who has crazy ideas, maybe sometimes, yeah, have quite a lot of them, but we are gonna trying to discuss as equals. I'm just person with different perspective of the things that happens to be young and that happens to look at the future. That's why it's important for me. That's why I'm going to these conversations, because I'm a young person. I know that I will gonna deal with it, and I take it maybe sometimes too much, but usually also as a learning opportunity. So.
Thank you. And so I think that as the time is flying by so quickly, we're going to open the floor to the questions from the audience, and please don't hesitate to type your questions in the chat. You can access the chat on the bottom of the Zoom. There's a chat option. So just type in your questions and we'll try to ask as many as we can. And for now, we have one question that was actually also quite popping in my mind a lot. I think that we heard so many ideas and successful examples how grassroots activism works and how successful campaigns were carried out. And the question would be how to replicate that in the future. How do you see further initiatives to connect, for example, Nordic and Baltic young climate activists, and in general, perhaps, how to connect the global climate activists?
To me, at least, I would love more talks like this, where we enable even like young climate activists to participate in discussing climate politics. So I think a lot of the young people that we see on the streets, at least in Denmark and like Sweden, all around the world, basically, they tend to be a bit younger, but that's also the age where they aren't really included in politics. It might be below the age where they're allowed to vote. So I think that's so important that we start at that age to include people and try to get them to actually like get a feel for politics and start to discuss even on a global level. Like if we can get one in Denmark to meet with someone in South America and talk about climate politics, I think that would be a huge experience for all of them.
I can only second that as well. I feel like that is the only thing I've been doing this this panel segment. Yeah, that was a good point. But it's really so important. And that is something that I'm seeing a lot in my role, that I feel like we don't need to invent the wheel each of us separately. We have so many good examples that we can just take from each other. I'm myself trying to set up some kind of WhatsApp chat with different UN youth climate delegates, and I think those digital solutions can also be really, really important, or like some kind of manual, like, okay, do you want to establish a youth climate council? This is how it was done in Denmark. Do you want to make your university de-invest in fossil fuels? This is how it was done in Helsinki. So I think that is something we can use in this digital age that we're living in. But then, of course, nothing can how do you say it? Well, nothing is as good as real meetings and these possibilities to discuss like today.
Well, I heard all that was said beforehand, but what I can add is that networking is really great opportunity, but using network is an amazing thing that you can do, and keeping each other informed actually what you're doing and what kind of meetings you have, what kind of people you are talking to, can help actually to get other countries' youth those same meetings on their level, because it's a little bit childish, but it worked really well. Latvian and Estonian youth delegate programs are doing it quite a lot. So we are doing it like, hey, Latvian Foreign Ministry, you know, the Estonians did it, so why we cannot? And you know, this is childish a little bit, but actually it helps if the competition is real. And sometimes if you like use this, I would say this is positive competition for a benefit of society, use it. And WhatsApp groups, especially in large events as COP, where you can put youth delegates together and keep each other informed what kind of side events you were, what was the information, because it's the information amount is huge, enormous. It's an amazing thing to do also.
I will very briefly comment and say that I completely agree with Kristiāna about this positive competition. There was really so much value for our campaign in being able to say, hey, you know, the Stockholm University did it, the Copenhagen University did it, why has nobody in Finland done it before? So really it's like so important and valuable to be able to have, to look up to something. And I felt that was really valuable, but also from like a grassroots level, I feel like our campaign could have used communicating with other activists. We sometimes felt a little bit alone. We had some communication with another Finnish campaign, but knowing that, for example, a lot of similar campaigns in Sweden had already reached their goal, it would have been really cool to be able to ask them, you know, what did you find that worked well? What was a waste of time? But there wasn't necessarily a platform where we could have easily done that. And all of the previous suggestions that the others have just given on the topic, I feel I support every single one of them.
I would love to ask, so like if we are going to do like a climate council as we have in Denmark and other countries, how can we actually help you guys do that? So we've actually been discussing this and trying to reach out to different countries, but like it's quite hard to figure out like how do you help, like without saying you need this, here you go, like that's also a wrong strategy.
Make a short video, like 2 minutes video, how amazing it is, so we can send it to our officials and say, hey, this is a great idea, we should do it. I think that's the first step, and then we can, about the tiny bits details as, oh, okay, how you're organizing the meetings, how you're organizing the topics, etc. I'll contact you later on. But like nice photographic, amazing videographic video, that would be, I think, the first step, because people are nowadays really like visual, like information.
I'll try to find someone that can do a video like that. It ended up being me with like a mobile phone trying to film something, but yeah, I'll try.
Okay, so I think that we're quite running out of time and we have 2 great questions. So maybe let's try to at least give some quick answers. So first question that I think is actually a great opinion, kind of wrapped in the question, is that EU is rather small in the terms of greenhouse emissions and the pollution that we produce, but EU Green Deal has been really loudly repeated or like discussed around the world. So what do you think about the can EU lead the way in kind of like decarbonization and cleaner future, and how much does it matter? And I see Fredrika has a...
May I? I think I'm passionate about this. I think we can always talk about, okay, EU only has 10% of the world emissions, but we have the historically largest depths of emissions. We've taken us to this position. Morally catastrophic not to take the lead, and also so many countries are waiting for the EU to take action. This year, 2020, is when country is supposed to update their national contributions, the NDCs, because it's going to be updated every 5 years. And so many countries are waiting for the EU to actually hand in the NDC. So we do have a lot of impact, I would say. And also not just that we have an historically large debt on a global scale, we also have the possibilities to take actions. I'm semi-quoting Emma Watson, but if not we, then who? Who could actually take the lead? Who could actually show that a green system change is possible, if not the EU? So I think it is our moral responsibility to do so, and also for all of us putting pressure on our governments to make sure that they're pushing for it in the EU negotiations.
Does anyone want to add to that? By the way, I think it was a beautifully summarized point, so I think that...
I will give a very short comment. That was a great answer, and coming from my perspective as the leader of this fossil-free campaign, we could have asked ourselves the exact same thing. Who cares if the University of Helsinki divests a couple $100 million? Like, what is it in the large scale? But really, there's so much value in it's symbolically important that somebody takes the lead. It's a statement. This kind of things, like, they shape the public discussion, and they really they cause this kind of snowball effects that really, if EU accounts for under 10% of global emissions, these kind of snowball effects are then the things that really, like, you know, take the effect a lot further and make it grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the last question that we're gonna take today will be about the COP26. And I think that I noticed that general feeling in the public that since the Paris Climate Agreement, there's been really huge ambitions. And in reality, since all that time, it seems like we haven't moved that far along to reach, to lower carbon emissions. So one of the viewers is asking a question, since the COP26 is postponed and more time is lost, how positive are you that it will be a real success next year? And how much do you think the postponement is affecting the approach and the strategy? And in general, what are your expectations? Yeah, Fredrika, go for it.
I'm thinking maybe since I'm the representation for COP26, I should take this question. I think it's a really, really important question that you're asking, since the postponement of COP will take the media attention of the issue that the NDCs are supposed to be handed in this year, and that is really, really worrying. I think not many people are talking about it at the moment, and I think we really need to do that as this year comes to a close. I wanted to speak about hope, and I think hope is really, really important. It's really hard to cling on to, but I think that is something that we need. And I also wanted to quote, I don't know who it is, but the best way to predict the future is to act on it. We don't know how COP26 will turn out, but we're sitting here, a couple of young people in different countries who can actually put pressure on our governments and make sure that, okay, it's not going to happen on my watch, at least. And I hope, like one issue of hope for me is that maybe this pandemic can teach us something, that it might become like, now is where we choose a path. We understand how vulnerable we are, and how much we are dependent on our planet and on each other. And what we're taking measures for in this pandemic is to protect the vulnerable and the weak. And that is exactly what we need to do on the upcoming COP. That is why we need to take action, to actually make sure that this is going to be a just transition for all of us. So I think it is up to all of us to make sure that the outcome of COP26 is as good as it can get. Yeah, and call for action.
Beautiful. So I'm thinking that if anyone else has anything to add, please go ahead. And if not, we're going to wrap up. And I'm really happy about the discussion. I think we left still quite interesting discussions that we're gonna have to meet up again some other time. And I think in general, what I learned or what has been repeated is that there is quite a big difference between the points of view or the approach that the older generation is taking and that the youth is taking. And I think that a lot of times it's very hard for younger activists to go and confront those who have been in the playing field for such a long time and have all the experience and a lot of numbers and just knowledge under their belt. So I think that it's a huge challenge, and I'm just fascinated to hear all these beautiful initiatives and approaches going from the public, like I mentioned before, the keyword of grassroots activism and kind of acting on a small scale to reach really huge changes, and going to the to more business-oriented initiatives like divestments. And I think that what we talked about in the general trend of EU, can EU lead the world in climate addressing climate change? And I think definitely what I hear from all the panelists is that there is so much optimism and so much that we can do, and we can especially go ahead and show the example, lead the example, and like this very special quote, if not us, then who? So I think that following that and following this kind of like positive loop of positive news, kind of like sharing, like Copenhagen did it, or Estonia did it, or Sweden did it, so everyone can do that. And I think that definitely maybe in some future campaigns we just need some really inclusive and very involving videos or other material to just reach the audiences and kind of spread the message. And I think that everyone really wants to have a bright future, and I think that this hard task of showing how to get there, this task is in the hands of the youth. And I think that you've just showed some amazing examples in the discussion. So I thank you all for that. And I thank everyone for listening and asking such brilliant questions. And I think I'll give the floor back to Sake to maybe say a couple words before we all go to our other business.
Thank you so much, Louis. Thank you so much to the panelists as well for a very interesting discussion. And this is actually the part where I wrap up the Nordic Convention 2020. This was the final session of the entire event. And I think it was a very, very good way to conclude the event. Yesterday, in the very beginning, we had a panel about Arctic security, where many of the panelists also stressed on the fact that climate is also a threat to Arctic security and a contributor to many different security aspects in that region. Later on in the EU panel on the same day, we also heard about the EU having to be a climate leader if we are actually to make change the way we want to make change and achieve the Paris goals. And very happy also to hear about the European Union and that aspect in the Green Deal also in this panel. This morning we heard Nicolas Kuela, the president of the Nordic Youth Council, give a speech about youth engagement, the Nordic cooperation in general, and also highlighting the climate aspect there as one of the key areas for youth in this times in the Nordic region, and also going forward increasingly also in the Nordic and Baltic setting in a wider region. And I think that this is a very, very good way to wrap up all that in a session where we got to hear so many good viewpoints and really interesting viewpoints as well, all the way from the grassroots, the bottom up, to what's going on at the COP conferences. Some of you have already been there, some of you are excited to go there. very nice to hear, and I hope that you are able to also keep the dialogue going. I'm really looking forward to hearing stories from COP26, Fredrika, when you are going there. Also very keen on hearing more about this, the continuation and the outcomes of the campaign, Lotta, at your university. Very excited also to follow what will be the next proposals from you, Sophie, in the Climate Youth Council, and of course also follow Kristiāna on your journey as a no longer the UN Youth Delegate, but in your coming projects later on. And of course, very much also looking forward to seeing more of these Climate Youth Councils pop up in other Nordic and Baltic countries. And I'm looking forward to see that 2-minute video that you are recording, Sophie, later on, where you are introducing this concept to the other countries. And speaking of short videos, we have one last treat for the Nordic Convention 2020. It's a video recording by the mayor of Helsinki, Jan Vapaavuori. He is giving the closing speech of the Nordic Convention 2020. He will not attend in person, but he has recorded a video transmitting his message. And he will actually welcome you all to the Nordic Convention on International Affairs 2021 in Helsinki on the 23rd, 4th, and 5th of April. So from the 23rd to 25th of April, mark that in your calendars. That's when the Nordic Convention next year is going to be, hopefully physically. We're strongly hoping that the borders will be remaining open between Nordic countries and that we can travel there. In this moment, we are now publishing Jan Vapaavuori's video on our Facebook page. You can check it out there. I will also right now enter it into the chat. So we will keep this Zoom chat open for a couple of minutes so you have the time to copy it from there, paste it to your browser, and see what the mayor of next year's host city has to say. And with that, I am closing the Nordic Convention of 2020. Thank you one more time for all the panelists. Thank you for you all in the audience to attend this session, and especially big thanks to those who attended all or at least 3 of the sessions. And yeah, like Louis said, now you can all get back to your business, and we see each other in Helsinki in April next year. Thank you.